AP people, we are going to review Chapter 10 today and cover all the big ideas that you need to know for your upcoming test. Let's start with the Bill of Rights. After the Constitution was drafted, many people who were anti-federalists or against the Constitution, against a strong central government, were very weary about the Constitution. So James Madison, who is the father of the Constitution, created a Bill of Rights. And he said to all the anti-federalists, those that oppose the Constitution, we will make sure a Bill of Rights is added if you support and ratify or approve the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights was created to appease or make the anti-federalists happy. Several freedoms were given to the states, and notably the 10th Amendment, which says all powers not given to the federal government are reserved for the states, and that's going to make many anti-federalists happy. So remember, the Bill of Rights was passed to make anti-federalists like Patrick Henry happy. Be able to identify that Patrick Henry is an anti-federalist. Washington as president, first president of the United States, and he establishes something called the cabinet. Nowhere in the Constitution is the cabinet found. What the cabinet is, leaders of various departments that offer advice for Washington. Major cabinet members that you need to know, two of them in particular are going to fight with each other quite a bit. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton, and Secretary of War Henry Knox. And the theme of the cabinet of Washington is going to be a feud between these two men, most notably over at the Bank of the United States. In 1789, there was the Judiciary Act, which created the Supreme Court, and it established one Chief Justice and 5 Associate Justices. There are 6 total people on the Supreme Court. This number will later be increased to 9, so that there will be an odd number, and there will never be a tie. John Jay, who is one of the 3 writers of the Federalist Papers, as well as Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, he was appointed the first Chief Justice. No, not Cardinals center fielder John Jay. This is John Jay. Boo the Cardinals. Customs duties and excise taxes. Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury, is in charge of fixing the U.S. economy. Remember, the U.S. is in a lot of debt. So he plans to pay off the debt through taxes. And there's 2 types of taxes that he plans on using. You need to know them both inside and out. Hamilton did like the debt, however. He said that it was good for the country. The more people the U.S. owed money to, the more people that would like to see the U.S. succeed. One type of tax that he instituted was a tariff, which is a tax on foreign goods. So any goods coming in from another country, he would slap a tax on. And this would favor American industry because now American goods wouldn't seem as expensive, but this hurt consumers because the prices of goods go up as a result of tariffs. And you're going to notice this, especially in the South and the West, where there isn't a lot of manufacturing, they're going to be really hurt. An excise tax is another type of tax, and it was a tax on manufactured goods in the United States. And one in particular was whiskey, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Hamilton and Jefferson, as I mentioned earlier, they did not like each other very much. They got into many arguments, and one of the arguments that they got into was over the Bank of the United States, which was created to help improve the economy of the United States. And this is a private corporation, but the government would have a lot of money tied up in the bank. Jefferson believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and what this means is, unless the Constitution said you can do something, the federal government cannot do it. Hamilton believed in loose interpretation, and he responded with the necessary and proper, or also known as the elastic clause. He said what the Constitution did not forbid, it allowed. That, again, is called a loose interpretation. Know that Jefferson strictly interpreted the Constitution and Hamilton loosely interpreted the Constitution. Ultimately, Washington's going to side with Hamilton and allow the bank. Hamilton's plan, 5 parts. You need to know all 5 parts. 1 is the Bank of the United States. 2 is excise taxes, which again is a tax on manufactured goods. 3 is funding at par, which means all debt that the U.S. owes, they will pay at face value plus interest. 4 is the assumption of state debts. States that are in a lot of debt are going to love this because the national government will now take on their debt. States that are not in a lot of debt are not going to like this because now the federal government is more involved. And finally, we have tariffs, which is a tax on imported goods. So Hamilton's financial plan, be fat, know it. Know all 5 parts. The Whiskey Rebellion, what are farmers upset about? They are upset about the excise taxes. So in southwestern Pennsylvania, they like it, they start rebelling. They tar and feather different revenue officers who are trying to collect the excise tax. Where have we seen this before? A certain group prior to the American Revolution went around tarring and feathering people, led by this man here. Samuel Adams, and the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. Washington sends in troops and crushes the rebellion really quickly. And the significance of the Whiskey Rebellion, this is asked oftentimes on the AP exam, it shows the power of the federal government. Shays' Rebellion, which happened during the Articles of Confederation, showed that the federal government was weak. Whiskey Rebellion shows that now that is a strong federal government and they can handle certain issues that may arise. Again, what prior rebellion showed the weakness of the Articles? That would be Shays' Rebellion. Whiskey Rebellion shows the Constitution is working. All right, we have the French Revolution going on in France and in Europe. What does Washington say? He says, look, we need to stay out. The United States needs to stay out of foreign affairs. However, the U.S. was bound to France through the alliance of 1778. Washington and Hamilton wanted to avoid war with England. Why? Because they felt that the United States was too weak. Neutral, we are not going to get involved in foreign affairs. And that many presidents after Washington will continue. All right, we have some problems with Britain. England is encouraging natives, just like Spain, they're encouraging Native Americans to attack the U.S. Treaty of Grenville, what this does is two things. Native Americans are forced to give up land in the old Northwest, that's the Ohio region, and Britain promises to abandon their forts, just like they did after the Treaty of 1783, which ended the Revolutionary War. 12 years later, they still are hanging out in these forts that they have promised to give up. We also have something called impressment. You need to know impressment. What this means, merchants often who are traveling on ships selling goods, the British Royal Navy would come up on board the ship and capture these Americans and say, you are now in the British Navy. All right, Britain promises leave forts, pay for damages of seized ships. This is under Jay's Treaty. I'm not sure why it's not up here. And this makes Southerners very, very mad. New England gets ships paid for, and the South still has to pay for war debt. So the South feels under Jay's Treaty did not benefit from this. We also have something called Pinckney's Treaty, which is a treaty with Spain, and it granted Americans navigation on the Mississippi. And this is going to be very important because the Mississippi is going to connect down to New Orleans and ultimately allow them to trade with the whole world. And also grants them some land north of Florida. Washington, as he nears the end of his second term, is going to establish a couple precedents. One is the two-term tradition and steps down after 2 terms. This is not in the Constitution when it was written. And also we have the avoidance of permanent alliances, and that is issued in his farewell address. Okay, unofficial fighting with France. France is very upset about Jay's Treaty. They feel that the U.S. is being too friendly with Great Britain, so they're very upset. John Adams, who is now president, sends John Marshall, a future Chief Justice, to France to meet with some ambassadors. He is approached by 3 different unidentified French agents, and they say, if you want to come speak with this ambassador, you have to pay us $250,000. John Marshall refuses. He comes back to the United States a hero. People love John Marshall, but they are furious with France. And you start to see a lot of people that want to go to war with France. As a result of this, we see 2 acts that are passed, the Alien and Sedition Acts. And the primary goal of both of these acts was to hurt Jeffersonian Democrats or Thomas Jefferson and his supporters. Remember, Thomas Jefferson was in favor of leave, unlike Hamilton, who was pro-British. So the Alien and Sedition Acts are aimed at hurting Thomas Jefferson. 2 separate acts, know the difference between each of them. The Alien Acts required residency to increase from 5 years to 14 years before you could become a United States citizen and vote. This would hurt those who would tend to vote for Thomas Jefferson, would limit the voter pool. Now it would take them 9 years longer before they could vote for Thomas Jefferson. The president could also deport foreigners and imprison them in times of war. So this gives the president a lot of power. And the Sedition Acts were also passed at the same time and said that anybody who criticized the government could go to jail or be heavily fined. This is a direct violation of the First Amendment. John Adams signs both of these into law, and very interestingly, this is 1798, they're said to expire after 2 years. Coincidentally, the same time that John Adams' presidential term is up, and thus they can't be used against him if he were to lose the election of 1800, which he ultimately does. Again, I can't stress this enough, both acts were used to limit the power or the influence of the Jeffersonians. All right, Jefferson, James Madison, 2 buddies, they're not going to like this very much, the Alien Sedition Acts. They're not going to take this lightly. So what they decide to do is issue something called the Virginia and Kentucky Resolutions. And the premise of these 2 resolutions states that individual states had the right to nullify unconstitutional laws passed by Congress. The theory is the states created the Constitution. They can decide if a federal law is unconstitutional. So they urged the Virginia and Kentucky legislatures to nullify the laws. The significance here is we're going to see this in the 1830s and then ultimately again in the 1860s when states try to nullify federal law. So you're going to see John C. Calhoun and other Southern leaders in the future reference these Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. That is all from Chapter 10. If you have any questions, please bring them up in class or email me, and good luck on your test. Have a good day, guys.